World. Hello, Hockey World. How are you guys doing? Sorry, my glasses are oddly distorting my face. I'm trying to figure out how not to do that. Okay. Anyway, we'll figure it out.
My head is
we're joined in a second by I know. We joined in a second by Russ Cohen, who is in the who is. I also just left the Zoom conference for the press conference for the Flyers. So we're going to talk about that in a second.
Yes.
When he gets in here, we wanted to talk a little bit about the Beatles documentary. Get Back, because I was kind of blown away. We're going to actually do a podcast. You guys on your show.
We're going to do a Rockology podcast on Thursday night that people can watch live and then listen to in podcast form later on. We're going to split it up doing a book review of the King Crimson book called 50 Shades of Crimson.
Yeah.
And also the Beatles Get Back documentary, which I've watched most of. And I'll just say this, and let me just because we know that after the Let It Be sessions that this covers, they recorded Abbey Road, and and basically the agreement was they knew that they were going to break up, but they said let's just do one more album and let's do it like we used to. And there were still some creative differences, but they made what I think is arguably their best album, which was Abbey Road. Maybe Revolver, maybe Rubber Soul, but I think Abbey Road.
I think it's between Sgt. Pepper and Abbey Road myself, but that's
not to get into this argument. I think Sgt. Pepper it's great, but to me, it's like their most vastly. I don't want to say overrated because they're nothing that they do is overrated, but I think overblown maybe. I mean, because it's a concept album, and I think that me being a progressive rock fan, I mean, Sgt. Pepper was basically the germination of progressive rock. So
it was in a lot of ways, it was. But, I mean, there were definitely other things like I kind of lean towards Jesus Christ Superstar being the beginning of that, but I think that they're definitely all in the same boat, and. I do think it's interesting. Someone in the chat room said they thought it was too long for the average fan. This thing, and I wonder that we're going to talk about that for sure later. But I was talking to Mike about that a little before we went on. It's pre-show. Yeah. We were talking about it for a second, and I was saying, I wonder because I haven't been in a band and sat around in this kind of circle working on songs. I'm loving that. Like to me, that's something that I've been through. I mean, I'm watching like when our guitarist would teach me songs, I would be looking at his fingers to get the chords, which is what you can see John Lennon doing, and you can see like you learn over time how to read chords from the guitarist fingerings and stuff like that. So I learned all that stuff, and I'm watching John Lennon. I love that. We'll get into it for sure on the Rockology show, but I love the dynamic of the four guys, and I love Ringo. Like and the funny thing about the thing with Ringo, that's like he's very much the guy who doesn't say much in the thing. He's really sort of doesn't talk about it, but he reminds me so much of why he is the perfect drummer, because I've worked with so many drummers, and the perfect drummers are guys like that. Like he's the pro. He is actually the most professional in the group, and you see it like through you see it through the way he handles. The way he talks to other people.
I think he was the funniest, but what did he actually provide as collaboration on the music? Nothing.
Here's where even the members of the Beatles will say he was key.
Yeah,
he was adaptable. He could
totally
play
adaptable.
Yeah,
he's not. There's a whole lot of passive aggressive in that room, and and there's none of it coming from him. Like. And
he was the easy-going guy.
Yeah, he's letting it. He's listening to what everybody has to bring to the table. He's giving his opinions, but he's not. There's none. Like there is a hell of a lot of passive. There's the relationship between Harrison and McCartney is so strained. It's crazy.
Yeah,
like that relationship is like amazing to watch. And because we all think of that's the one thing I think that I get out of this. And we'll get into it more. But I love getting into. I love the idea that everybody's like always like McCartney and Lennon were at odds. Really, it's way bigger between Harrison
and that's what I think is mostly gleaned out of the documentary. Harrison, if you remember, throughout most of the early albums was limited to one or two tracks per album, and he saw Lennon and McCartney as a musical combo, as a writing combo, getting and he wanted. I mean, one thing that Russ and I both picked up on, the business part of music was extremely important for them. And Harrison wanted to get some publishing done, so he wanted to get his songs out.
And he's got the recording equipment that they're using. He's like the one who's got it all together. And honestly, so he's sitting there, and Paul and John are pulling out songs from when they were 14 years old, trying to make it work. He comes in with "I Me My," which is an unbelievably beautiful, great song out of nowhere. And they're kind of like shoveling it. It's just that dynamic is like crazy.
And he plays "All Things Must Pass," and they sort of like it, but I know.
Compared to the crap that Paul and John are trying to like sell on,
I will give John and Paul a pass though, because they're under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
They didn't have enough new music. So they're trying to fill the 14 song whatever set that they're trying to do. And what I found interesting was, on the publishing end, how they were going to have to, because it was on television, have to compensate the bands, whoever the writers were, for whatever older tunes that they were going to play. That was interesting when George Martin started to go through all that and talking about like the Copyright Act in 1911. I found that interesting.
And the one last thing I'll say, we got to save it for the other show, because I have so many notes. Like
there's tons of
hours and hours to talk about on the other show. The one thing that I really love is when they break into a lot of Dylan songs throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, they do.
When they're just practicing, and that is a typical thing for bands. Like when I've been in bands, in my band long enough to know that you'll break into like the newest, like our band will go into like a Rage Against the Machine song or a Radiohead song, or break in. They just break into things like whatever they're listening to now, right? And they have fun with it. You have the real sense that the Beatles, like they thought Dylan was infinitely cooler than them, and
he was definitely an influence. I mean,
but they also I'm garnering from this a little bit so far, at least, that they were like, we are like pop monkeys to compare to Dylan. Like Dylan's like,
I think that's true.
Dylan's like,
but you also saw, and like I said, we'll save this for the Rockology, but you also saw that dynamic between them and the Beach Boys. The Beach Boys did Pet Sounds, and they wanted the 8-track machine that Harry.
I love that.
And the reason that
the Beach Boys have it,
right? And they're American,
but they're Americans,
right? So I mean, there was definitely, and it's turned out after the fact that it was basically a friendly competition, because Brian Wilson and McCartney, there was ultimate respect between the two of them.
Yeah.
But there was like, they did this, so now we got to do this. We have to bounce back and forth. And
and Sgt. Pepper is a direct reaction to Pet Sounds.
Yes.
So it's like so we'll get into that. We got to get into the stuff. But this will be a fun show. Thursday night we're going to talk about it. Okay. So Thursday night we're going to do a show, and we'll give you more information on how you can watch it. But we're going to do they have the Rockology show that Russ says on his website.
Well, you can watch it on this. We'll record it on this, and then you're just gonna have to be there that time, because after that.
So I guess 8:00 on Thursday night we're gonna do it. 8:00. So if you guys want to jump in the chat room, you'll be able to come back and you'll be able to do that whole thing. So
one other thing, like Funky said, they praised Clapton. They also probably edited out a lot of bands that they didn't praise, and I believe there was some heavy editing that went on with that, because when you're young like that, you are always ripping some of your competition, and there was none of that.
I have a good feeling that they edited out a lot of criticism and snarky stuff about the Stones, because there was a direct competition, even though they were friendly with them.
Yeah, it's hard to believe they would have a session and not even mention them.
I know.
Well, Lennon mentioned them, but then it was just a mention.
He got on quickly. All right, let's move on. Here we go. Ready? All right, hello, Hockey World. We want to talk about that very much, but we will talk about it later. Hello, Hockey World. It is Tuesday, November 30th, 2021.
I'm Michael Agello, and the Get Back documentary only confirms the Beatles are better than the Stones.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology. I have no problem with that.
And I'm Michael, and you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday. And also, it also confirms how much Paul McCartney looks like Danny Briere. Like there's just like it's a ridiculous. They look so much like it is insane.
I think McCartney's taller though.
He's definitely taller, but man, their faces, it's just ridiculous.
All right, Dan.
You're watching Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And I want to start with Briere for a second, if I could, while we're there.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing some research yesterday into different things, different people who possibly for the GM. And we've all mentioned on here that, you said, Russ, you didn't think Danny would do it. And I said,
I think he wants a full-fledged GM.
I kind of agreed with you. talking through, not through Danny, but through different people around in different situations, he's definitely in it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure he's in it.
No, but he's in it willingly. So
okay.
Yeah, so I do think that there are some other people who are who are also in it. Like I do think Pat Brisson is a part of it, and that's sort of a really interesting twist because if Gordon comes in and hires Brisson, like then Gordon very much is not like Brisson's a definite general manager, right? He comes up as he's a full time.
Then it's more of a
partnership, right? Yeah. It's more Gordon becomes like the capologist type character. Brisson has like all kinds of, obviously all kinds of.
Well, except there's still things Brisson has to learn. Brisson would probably have crazy trade ideas that Gordon would have to tamp down too.
I was told by 2 or 3 people years ago. Like I was at a lunch with like 5 players during a Stanley Cup final on an off day, and it was just weird. They were all talking about a project they wanted me to get involved with, and one of the things that came up was 3 of them were represented by Pat Brisson, and they said that they were told flat out that Pat Brisson was offered the Canadiens job way back when. And I mentioned this before, but it's kind of weird. And Brisson didn't want the Canadiens GM job, but Brisson is the one who recommended Marc Bergevin to be the general manager, and said after Bergevin, come back to me. And that does. So yesterday when I contacted 2 of the people that I heard this from originally, and I said, "What do you think?" And they said, "I don't know. That would be interesting." I saw that no one. It was a long time ago, obviously, that I was told this, and whether Brisson wants to go in right now into the Montreal Canadiens mess or what have you, but they're not going to have a hard time finding somebody to be the GM.
I'll tell you what I just brought up on Sirius.
Yeah,
I don't think they'll have a hard time finding anybody, but if Jeff Gordon does a good job, he's never leaving Montreal. There'd be no reason for him to leave. It's the pinnacle.
Oh yeah, no, you don't leave. You don't leave voluntarily.
So the guy who gets the other job is always going to be having to work with Jeff Gordon. You're never going to be the guy.
That's kind of true. Yeah, it does remind me a lot of Burke and Trevelyan, back in Calgary.
Right, and that's exactly what it's like.
Yeah, and Burke and Hextall in Pittsburgh.
And guys like Burke and Gordon who have been fired, right or wrong from several general manager positions. Don't mind the hockey ops position because of that reason. No. It's like,
well, I wouldn't be surprised if the eventual GM of Montreal is somebody who is heavily ensconced in player personnel and scouting, because that would leave Gordon for sort of hockey operations and to sort of divvy up all the responsibilities. I haven't heard his name, and he probably wouldn't be included because he doesn't speak French. But if a guy like Mike Fuda would make a lot of sense, because
he wouldn't do it. He'd want to be the guy.
Well, right. He's like, where I think a guy like Briere or somebody along those lines is probably the perfect person to put in that position if they're willing to do it.
If he's willing to. If it's like willing to be,
knowing Briere is about as media friendly as you get.
Well, I think Thibault might be better actually because he's working with Hockey Canada.
Yeah, that's true.
I think because you're working with Hockey Canada, you have
obviously both were French
Canadian.
Both French Canadian, both played for the team. Both, Briere is definitely on the GM track. He's not. But he himself, I think, would admit that he's not.
No, but the one thing about when you're working with Hockey Canada, you have access to thousands and thousands of young players, like a database, all of that. So Thibault's been exposed to that.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Another name that's popped up, who's an assistant in Tampa Bay, former Canadian, is Matthew Darsh. It's part of that Tampa Bay tree, which, obviously is Yzerman and Verbeek and Julian Bourgeois. So, he would be, I think he's been there been in Tampa as an assistant for a while. Yeah. The one thing that scares me about Briere, I think Briere is very capable and up and coming. He just hasn't been doing it for a while. It's been a couple years, so I think he needs a little more experience before. At least Darsh has been part of that machine.
Darsh would probably have a better chance than Briere.
Well, but I think that job, for what it is right now, at least, is way more of a PR job than a hockey job.
Oh yeah, you have to be the face. You're the face.
You have to look at who would be the best face of those 3 guys. And I think you're right about Thibault as far as having way more contacts and information.
He's going to have sway with the fans. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, but Briere is definitely probably the best the most likable character that just gets up there and and that's the thing about him that really just shines. And
another thing about Darsh, he's from Montreal. He went to Gill for 4 years, which is, right.
That's a big
right
deal.
there. And he played 3 years at the end of his career for the Canadiens. So
no, he fits in. I mean, he fits in all the possibilities. You're right. But they're gonna take a little while on this though, from what I've been told.
There's no reason not to.
There's no reason not to. They don't need I mean, the obviously French media would be happier.
Well, it's funny, Eck, and I said this yesterday, and because we expected the first shoe to drop to be Vancouver, and then it ended up being Montreal. I know Elliot Friedman reported that there was really a race for Gorton because he was clearly the one that a number of teams wanted to get, and he mentioned Anaheim, and I don't know about Vancouver or Chicago, but what the job that he did, even going back to being a interim general manager in Boston when he raped John Ferguson Jr. in the Kessel deal, or not in the Kessel deal, excuse me, the Tuukka Rask for Andrew Raycroft.
Yeah, that was unbelievable.
That's the one. The Kessel deal was Burke. But yeah, and then everything that he did with the Rangers. I mean, the challenges will be different in Montreal, but he did a very good job, and he only lost it because of a sort of power struggle in New York. And I also laughed at the fact, and God bless him if you can get this. Chris Drury, as a first-time general manager, is making over $4 million
because of that dual position.
Holy crap!
I know. That's a whole other conversation for a whole.
Yeah, that's a big conversation because those positions are so like fluid as to what they are. It's like it's just I've been around presidents of hockey operations. I've been around presidents of teams. I don't know what the difference is sometimes.
But you also have to remember how big an enterprise MSG is, right?
What MSG is, right? So I mean, Drury has a lot of stuff that he does, but he's delegating that out to assistants and stuff like that too. So it's like it's more about Drury being,
Now the other thing in the name that we haven't mentioned, Patrick Waugh. He spoke to the media. He's the GM and coach of the Quebec Ramparts of the
yes, he is.
Of the QMJHL, and he met with the press this morning and said he confirmed that he has interest in the position, but he has yet to be called. And that doesn't mean anything because they could be taking it could be a lengthy process. But here's the thing. If he's GM, owner, and head coach of the Quebec Ramparts, he's going to want power. He's going to want.
Oh, there's no way Patrick Waugh is going to work under Jeff Gordon. I mean, that's the thing. That's the issue. Jeff Gordon is not going to. Jeff Gordon and Patrick Waugh are not going to work together very well. I don't see that as I think Montreal needs goodwill right now. They don't need more controversy. They need to get the least controversial person they can in there.
Right.
I do agree with you on that.
Yes, I do.
So it's like Patrick Waugh is not that guy. I mean, Patrick Waugh could be that guy eventually, but
had they not hired Gorton, I would think that Waugh would be at top of the list because he would want power and control. But now that Gorton's there, they obviously are giving him a certain amount of power and control.
There's a lot of Montreal Canadian fans that don't like Patrick Waugh. It would be a really like they have one of the more interesting things about the Molson press conference yesterday too. Then we'll move on, but was he made a lot of effort into how the team is perceived outside of the rink. Like he talked a lot about being being wise socially. Being basically, it went back to me thinking immediately of the player that the Canadians drafted this year, right? Like that, yes. The way all the bad blood that came from that, and that I think had something to do with this. I think that was in this.
Well, that's why Gorton's a good hire. He's had to deal with that.
And
right.
and the chatter is that they may renounce him, just like Arizona renounced the pick that they made a couple years ago. That had some off the ice issues, and that's a pretty sad statement that they have to
I think, and I'm going to say that, and it's
a sad statement that they haven't done it yet.
I think that if they don't do it immediately, it's like if you don't do it immediately, and if you come out immediately saying, "Listen, we believe everybody should have a second chance" or what have you, you can't do that. Like if you do that now, you really
now it becomes even a bigger story.
Yeah, I think that at this point you have to be like, okay, he's
not playing anywhere. Eck, we just looked it up.
Yeah.
He's playing nowhere.
That is kind of crazy. I mean, and maybe they
nobody wants him in their league.
They're not going to publicly renounce him, though. They're going to let that fade out if they.
Yeah, that's probably what they'll do
as best as they can, which is not like so. But I do want to get into what Esmer says because Czech uses back tonight, which is interesting because the Devils are playing really well. But I don't. But before we get there, we have to start in the Metro Division about 90 miles south of that because we just had Russ and I were just in a press conference with Chuck Fletcher, who gave a State of the Union for the Philadelphia Flyers, and where we're at with that team right now is, and the press conference was unique. I thought.
I thought it was like vanilla, but
there were certain things that bothered me a lot, Russ. Okay, so
one thing bothered me. There was one that bothered me.
All right, so see if it's the same thing. When he came into the press conference, people were worried, is Vigneault gonna be fired? If the assistant coach is gone, what's gonna happen? And really it was just a State of the Union. Yeah. Really it was more about like, hey, Hayes and Ellis are gonna be back soon and that's gonna help. But and I think that's a lot to put on those guys, first of all, but that's not what really bothered me. What really bothered me is he was very into this 10-game segment concept.
Yes, that bothered me.
Right? So like
the first 10 games mean nothing now.
Right, because he admitted like, and I'm talking about this a lot because I was just handed it today, and I've been looking it over like the comparison of the first 10 games where we're 6-2-2 and the last 10 games where we're terrible. And he kept talking about how good they were the first 10 games because when you look at a comparative sheet, you're like, hey, we were pretty good then.
Yeah. But although he said we're pretty good, but we knew we had some issues.
He did say that. He did cover himself with that.
He did.
But it was very evident that he didn't want to blame injuries, but he also doesn't want to make any changes until everyone's healthy and playing again. So that's another thing that's like, okay, what is
might wait all year for that.
Right. You're never NHL teams are never healthy. NHL teams have to be able to survive these kind of injuries. They have not been decimated by injuries. Okay, I don't care what people say.
No, they're not.
Ellis is important, but he's not everything. It would have been worse to lose Provorov, for example.
Right.
Hayes is important. It's worse to lose Giroux. There's like things that it's worse to lose. I don't know. Farabee would have been worse than losing Hayes to me. So to me, these injuries, and you did talk about Carter Hart, but there was a whole lot of how good they were the first 10 games in this press conference, and a whole lot of talking about that and how and then when the power play was asked about, which is my buddy Michel Therrien is the power play coach. So when the power play was questioned, his response was, well, the power play hasn't been good since 2014-15. So why are we talking about it? And that was just a crazy response.
Yeah,
that's nuts. That's you can't say that. And then to double down on that, he says we don't have a player, we don't have a natural goal scorer from the flank.
I was out of the press conference at that point already. You know what he did say though? He did say in those first 10 games they were ranked 14th in the power play, 21%. He did say that and acted like that was okay.
That's middle of the league.
I know.
That's
but
middle
he
of the league.
Like it was okay.
And then exactly. And no, he did come out and say when they said, "Do you blame the coaches for the power play?" He sat there and he said, "We weren't good since 2014, so I don't. It's no different now." That's not an answer. And then to go on and say, "Do you blame the personnel?" And he's like, "Yeah, I do blame the personnel, which is on him, of course." But then at the same time, he says we don't have any natural goal scorers to flag, which is ridiculous. They have total natural goal scorers from that situation.
I mean, James Van Riemsdyk supposed to be a natural goal scorer. We'll start with
right. I mean, Giroux. That's where Giroux scores his power play goals from.
Yeah.
I mean, he takes that. He does that. He tries. He's not Stamkos or Ovechkin, but that is where he does score from.
But James Van Riemsdyk was slowing down 3 years ago when Philadelphia signed him. So that's a bit of a problem.
But Cam Atkinson, they traded for him because he's a natural goal scorer. They did.
Right. They did. And they've tried, and they have guys, and they aren't this team isn't blessed with a bunch of natural goal scorers, and the ones that
it's not like they have Ovechkin or anybody like that.
Right. But who does? I mean, how many natural goal scorers in the way he was talking about it, I would say there's 5 or 6 in the league,
Yeah.
It's like every other you have to survive without that. And that can't be what you can't be relying on the fact that you don't have Ovechkin to be why you're not winning. That's not what you can't say. You can't say that. And it was a bizarre. I mean, so someone said, "Do you see a point at which the coaches would be to blame?" This is right at the end of the press conference, and he said, and instantly said, "Well, of course, he didn't answer it, but he said, of course, every situation is different and all the da da da." He says, but we're not gonna, we're not gonna make those kind of decisions until we're healthy on the ice for a good 10 games.
You may never see that.
You're never going to see that in the NHL. Like, when can you guarantee that? And the reality is, they have a lot of good players right now that aren't performing. Couturier, 1 goal in like 12 games, whatever. Farabee, 2 goals in 15 games. It's just, and then Frost, who was playing on the fourth line,
but AV won't do it.
And he's and here's the interesting thing about that, okay? Because I know Frost. I was reading Flyers Twitter for a second, which is a hilarious place to be. I only go there very briefly, but I'm on there, and they were talking about Frost playing on the fourth line, and then in the press conference,
I know where you're going.
He says he's taking Brassard's spot, and he's going to be between 2 good goal scorers. Well, that's not the fourth line,
no.
And so here we go. We have a coach doing one thing, and a general manager saying another thing. So what's happening here?
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely the right hand doesn't know what the left is doing. That's part of it.
Well, we'll see what happens when they play their next game. But if all of a sudden you see Morgan Frost on the fourth line with Nate Thompson, then you know what? He's better off.
Nate Thompson's getting surgery, by the way. He's out for a while.
Yeah,
okay. All right. But if he's playing on the fourth line with whoever's playing it, Patrick Brown or
they won't put him on the fourth
or
line.
Zach McEwen, send him to Lehigh.
No, they're not gonna put him on.
No, but I'm saying send him to Lehigh Valley then.
No, and he said he didn't want to bring Frost up from Lehigh. They talked about this for a little bit. He didn't want to bring Frost up from Lehigh. Did you hear this part? Because he said he was playing so well. I wanted him to play a couple more games or a couple more weeks and get even better.
Yeah, I get that, but you didn't see. Again, I understand that, right? But sometimes you do have to call up guys when things are going bad or you have injuries. And I still say, if you put him with Giroux, he'd have done much better. Even though he's doing okay, but he's not scoring, I think he would have done much better. And I think if they would have brought him in a few games earlier instead of bringing him in against the best teams in the league, it would have been different for him too. But they didn't do that. So they did it as a complete emergency, and you never get the best results that way.
Right. You're right. And he also brought up the fact that in this last 10 games, they played 7 of the best teams in the league. All right, that's true. That's fine. But the reality is, the way you treated this summer by being aggressive and going out and getting the kind of players you made, you believe you're in that group. You have to believe you're in that group, or else you made stupid moves. And so to me, I think there's the three-headed monster at play here, and I really think it is Vigneault, Fletcher, and Comcast, all working all having different opinions on things. And I think that is why I wonder if anybody's safe, honestly. And because I know that Comcast was behind a lot of those deals this summer because they wanted to see some excitement. They wanted the Flyers to go out and make some trades again because they don't do that anymore. And that's like that's like a callback to Ed Snyder and type stuff.
Is Comcast willing to eat 2 years of Vigneault's salary?
Not 2 years. No, they'll wait a little longer.
Right. So
no, I don't think that matters to them.
Oh, I do, because they already have a half-empty building at times.
Yeah, but that's a write-off in their world. I mean, they have. I mean, Comcast has plenty that they can write. There's
a lot of people looking at packages. Zach.
There is an opportunity here if you want to reset with the current Okay, I'm just listing off the guys who are available: Boudreau, Tortorella, Babcock, Tocchet. I mean, there are guys you could bring in that could turn things around.
Well, that's it, Mike. And you talked about the Scott Gordon race, right? Is there going to be a Tocchet race at some point here? And there could be. Like Vancouver, they could be making a coaching change at any point here. Montreal could make a coaching change at some point here.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen there. I think they'll go another 10 games, and I think if they don't do well, you might see Dave Scott out trump Fletcher and just say, bring in Tocchet. That's who I want.
He might fire both of them.
He could.
I mean, if it goes another 10 games like this, because the way, if I'm Comcast, I'm listening to that press conference today. Fletcher is very much acting as if the coaches are doing everything they can.
Right, and you know what? I mean, Fletcher. We said this during the offseason. Fletcher did things that clearly he didn't want to do in terms of going out and making trades the trades that he did. That definitely was something that was pushed on him by Comcast. At least I believe so from an outside perspective. And if that's the case, then all he's going to do is go back to Dave Scott and say, well, okay, this is the team that you told me to put together.
Yeah,
Not
and I think
I wanted to put together.
Yeah, and that's true, but that's how companies like that work, like and
it is. I think they have 10 more games before anything happens, though. Anyhow, that's my thought.
So to this just out, I just got this text that that the Bruins GM Don Sweeney has just told the media that when Tuukka Rask is healthy and wants to continue playing, Rask will be likely part of our group.
Of course he is.
Of course he is.
Which isn't big news.
And Swayman's going to get sent down.
Which isn't big news, but is now that's not the big NHL news today, though.
No.
the big NHL news today comes in the form of a memo that was sent out by the NHL about a half hour ago.
Right. I got it up here.
Yeah, Mike, why don't you read some of it? Tell people what's going on with it.
Due to the recent increase in the number of COVID-19 infections, the number of clubs under enhanced measures, and the temporary shutdown of 2 NHL clubs, effective immediately, all club-organized holiday parties for this season shall be canceled.
No!
And until further notice, players and club personnel shall refrain from participating in autograph sessions open to the public speaking engagements, and public charity events. So they're going into shutdown mode.
Yeah, I actually made a joke on Sirius and said, do you want to see guys in ugly sweater parties, or do you want to see them on the ice? Like, that's
I
the
know.
end of
It's like the holiday party thing is like, oh my God. No, but I agree. No, listen, but it's serious. And and Mike, I am starting to buy into your conspiracy theories about the Olympics. I will give you huge credit if this does turn out the way, and I really hope it doesn't. But if it does go that way, I'm starting to feel like this is a definite passive aggressive shot. The NHL.
It's a walk up act.
It's a method, right? There's a method to their madness here.
I mean,
I think there is a method. I mean,
what they're doing here is they have to do, and I'm not saying that this is wrong. This is absolutely the right thing to do.
Why would you want players being close to large numbers of people? Why?
Right.
Well, okay. Just today, a player on the Edmonton Oilers is in COVID protocol. Bruce Cassidy, the coach of the Bruins, is in COVID protocol. The Sudbury Wolves of the OHL have shut down because 12 players have tested positive or in their COVID protocol.
These are all vaccinated people.
Yeah, and these are all vaccinated people because
they're in close proximity on the ice.
Right. I mean, so hopefully because they're vaccinated, there aren't serious things. But we're going through we're going through it, and yeah, you're right. I mean, and the fear here is that how fast COVID grabbed last time. We heard these kind of things. We were talking about this kind of stuff on a podcast like 3 days before there was no more season.
Right.
And we were acting like, oh, this is getting kind of bad, but
But we were dumber then. We didn't really know.
Well, this is the thing I'll find interesting. I can't remember what team it was, but I know that St. Louis had an issue in terms of they had COVID cases and they tried to call up players and they couldn't call them up because of the cap. We've seen teams shut down now. Yeah. The question is whether when this gets worse, when you got multiple positives, whether the NHL will say no, and you can't call up people. Well, at a certain point, then then you're going to have to postpone games because they're not going to have enough people, and they're not going to give these teams any flexibility under the cap.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a real issue with postponing games. I think it's smart. I don't think they're at the point where they have to cancel seasons because I do think that this is
they're not doing that.
I do think that we understand COVID better now than we did then too. So there's a certain amount of reality of that as well. Like. With vaccinations, people are safer. We're in a different world now than we were.
I'll tell you what could be in trouble, the All-Star game.
The All-Star game should be in trouble.
Well, and should never be.
It should have happened anyway. I know.
I understand.
But also, what could be in trouble is some places. I can see some places like Ontario and stuff like that shutting the fans out again.
No, I don't.
No, I don't think they're going to do that.
I don't know. I mean, it's like.
I hope you're wrong because that would be part and parcel with them shutting the border again, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Oh yeah, no, I mean I don't want any of that, and but I think that some of the more Canada has shown it to be conservative, to go as conservatively as they can in these situations. I don't mean that politically, but just be conservative in their actions.
Today is the first day in which Canadians can come over the U.S. border and go back without a test. But of course, Americans going into Canada have to provide a test. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, right.
So I mean, there is some loosening up here, but this is, the one thing that, like you said, the one thing is that all these players, whether it's the OHL or the Q or the NHL or the AHL, they're all vaccinated. And that means that, with probably a few exceptions, the cases will be just them being able to stay home and isolate, and it be the level of maybe the common cold, and not being something where they're going to be on a ventilator and in a hospital.
Right. It's a flu. I mean, it's a flu. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's
a flu. I mean, I had it after I was vaccinated, and it sucked. But it's and it's different for everybody. Obviously, everybody faces different kinds of symptoms or what have you. But it's not. And it's definitely a flu for sure. And, And
I agree with Jonathan in the chat here, but the NHL in past instances this year have not done that. So the thing is, if all of a sudden they do it, then if I'm Doug Armstrong, the GM of the St. Louis Blues, I'm going to say to the league, go F yourself.
They can't do it for a lot of reasons. Because what you said, somebody was already in this situation. But the main reason they can't do it is because these teams are still not totally liquid with money. Like, I mean, the cap. If you raise the salary cap, you do raise what you have to pay. I mean, that's what this salary cap is. I mean, you have to suddenly pay more money out, and if they have to pay more money, I mean, they're cutting back on staff, like guys who are making $200 or even $100 or $50,000 a year. They're not going to sit that, so they're not in a spot where they can be just bringing in guys willy nilly and with salary cap situations. And spending more money. I mean, these teams don't have a ton. They're still battling back from obviously all the money that they've lost. So that's not going to happen. They're not going to make salary cap exceptions. I mean, they're going to have to figure out something. But I don't know what that is. And I do think that the way they're shutting down teams now is the smart way to do it. Shut down a team for a period of time. And I think that's the right way to do it. And the reality is, maybe every team goes through it where everybody gets it, and then we move on. Because it is, it does seem like if you're vaccinated and you get it, you're less likely to keep getting it. The more antibodies you build up, at some point, hopefully, we'll be okay in that, but who knows? We don't know. But I do think that the players at some point here are going to have a really serious thought about the Olympics.
And that's why I brought up what Emily Kaplan tweeted over the weekend, because it wasn't management that brought it up. It wasn't a coach. It wasn't an owner. It was a player. We don't know what player, and we do know that a lot of these players, they want to go. They're in their 20s. They want the glory of playing for their country. I get that. I understand why Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews want to go. But at a certain point, when you're going to be, I heard Jeff Merrick talking about this today. Apparently, there was a Polish, I think it was an ice dancer or a luger or something like that, who was overdoing trials in Beijing, in China, earlier this year, contracted COVID, and they would not allow him to get on a commercial flight out of China, that he was to be relegated and quarantined for 3 weeks. He ended up flying out on a cargo plane because
my question is, the players can charter their own flight too. Like, that's not. I wonder about that. Like, I don't think.
You can't get out of the country. It doesn't matter.
I mean, it depends how that is. I mean, there could be exceptions made for that situation.
Well, it seems right now that that's a sticking point, because they're saying that if somebody contracts it,
they're definitely worried about it.
They're going to have to stay there for 3 weeks.
No, I agree. They're worried about it. I've talked to people about it too, like in the last couple of days, and they're definitely worried about that 3 week thing. But I also think that there's a feeling like, okay, we can.
Yeah. Oh, and
probably get around that. Like, there's ways to get around that. Versus not send. I mean, if you go to China ahead of time and say, listen, we're going to charter our own planes. If one of our guys gets COVID, we're going to fly him back on our own, or else we're not going to bring our guys there. China will be like, okay, there's certain things I think that can happen.
China just said the Olympics will go smoothly despite the new variant. So I don't know what we're worried about.
And today I don't know if you saw, the Asian market just took a big hit from because there's fear about the new cases over there. So there's definitely the Olympics are not coming fast enough, put it that way. Like, they really, if they were in the middle of January, it would be a lot better. I feel a lot better about it than I do now.
I'm sure the investigation at Wuhan has gone smoothly too, Russ. But one other thing here. Now, I don't know how many.
We lost your mic a little bit, Mike. I don't know why.
Yeah, you're muffled, Mike.
You got muffled all of a sudden. You want to try that?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I don't know if that mic is. Maybe unplug and plug that mic back in.
Yeah.
USB thing or something like that. If you can, if that's possible. I think that the mic just might need to be replugged in. Yes, but I do think that the speaking as this plays along, I really do believe. And I tried to get at Kevin yesterday. Are there backup plans? And is there like another U.S. Olympic team working out somewhere?
Well, I don't think there's another team working out. I think there's just a list of names.
Or do the World Juniors Junior teams become the Olympic teams?
You know what I think is going to happen? What I think is going to happen is that the U.S. roster for the Spengler Cup will be the Olympic team.
Could be.
Because that's a non-NHL team made up. And, you could get NCAA players because remember Adam Fox, Troy Terry.
Yeah.
I mean, you could get some recently retired players too. So
yeah, I mean Owen Power could play in the Olympics after playing in the World Junior. But the thing is, I mean, I'm sure Michigan has
probably won't allow it.
Right, Michigan, but but there were NCAA products who were out. I mean, I don't remember if Fox was still at Harvard at that point.
Yeah.
I don't think he was.
Yeah,
I don't think so. I think that was over.
I mean, Brian Leach did do that back in the day, but it's not been done much.
Right.
Yeah. Someone play in the world
One goes to the Olympics, then to the end from NCAA to the Olympics to the NHL. That's what Brian Leach did in 1 year.
Did he play the World Juniors that year?
I don't know.
Yeah,
that would be something. I mean,
it would be, but I don't think so.
That would be like an impressive.
Ken Morrow did that.
I do think Mangiani has a chance at the Canadian Olympic team. Thank you for those who were asking that question.
Dave Christian.
Yeah, Christian was in college. That's true. Yeah.
There we go.
Mark Johnson, Neil Brock. I think
that was back then. There haven't been that many.
Recently. That's true. So
it's true.
Now, look, we got to talk about this because we seem to be Bruin-centric here, but it came out yesterday that Jake Debrusk has requested a trade. Now, we've heard his name in the trade circles, I'd say probably the last, 12 to 18 months, but it seems to have reached a head.
12 to 18 years, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it seems to have reached a head. Now, apparently, the Boston's having some COVID issues, so they need him to play, even though he's requested a trade.
Right.
And they can't call up players from Providence because Providence is having COVID issues. So, but I saw a report. I don't know if it was Haggerty or Fluto Shinzawa, I believe, that said that there were as many as 8 teams interested in him. And I think he's a good player, but he just doesn't seem to fit with what Boston's doing right now or what they're
Cassidy. He and Cassidy don't get along.
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, there's definitely something with him and the Bruins that just doesn't mesh. I mean, there's obviously because he's a good player. I mean, when they play him, they tend to play him.
19 goals, and I remember talking to him at the Winter Classic, and he was one of their main players.
Yeah.
But then under Cassidy, it sort of has gone away.
Yeah, I wonder. He's from Edmonton. I believe his dad is part of the Sportsnet broadcast crew that based in Edmonton. I wonder whether the Oilers might be a destination. And I was looking for a comparable aged player, a comparable player that would fit a trade, and maybe a Kailer Yamamoto would fit a possible deal, Russ.
No, they're not giving up Yamamoto for.
I also think that they're not gonna. I think that they are saving their cap space for their goalie. Here's
why I wouldn't do that trade. Yamamoto's got twice the speed. If his offense eventually kicks in, he's a way better player than Debrusk. So you're not going to take that risk.
Well, I agree, but and Yamamoto just signed. I think it was a bridge deal. I'm just looking to see how much he's making. He's making 1,175. So he's making a couple million less than Debrusk. I mean, maybe Boston would have to take a haircut to make the salaries match.
Right.
But
I don't know what's going on with Cassidy and Debrusk because Debrusk had the one good year under Cassidy, and then last 2 have not been good. Maybe it's been all this trade talk. I think
the trade talk helps, and I also think that that in Boston they're this is a team where it's probably like Cassidy. It's probably like the guys above. When they don't like a guy, they just don't like a guy. And
I did bring that up the other day on a show. I was like, the one thing about Boston is they will bring up young players, but if they don't feel like they fit their narrative or whatever, they don't really get a chance. And it does seem like Studnicka now is this next one that is going to have a hard time breaking in just because.
they make hard, fast decisions. Like Neely and those guys, they really do. Like they really do. And they decide. And with Debrusk, I think the irony of the whole thing is they know he's got value, so they're kind of stuck. They know
low salary, the low salary,
right? And they know people like him out there, so they have to keep playing him too. Like they have to keep. So they do try to play him as and when they play him, like it's funny. I've seen some situations where the Bruins are in games where late in the game they're trying to come back, and they'll have Debrusk out there trying to like they know he can score.
Yeah.
It's just where they don't.
And now they're asking the guy to play his best while he knows he's going to get traded. That's never easy.
Oh yeah. No, it's not. It's never ideal. They really are in a spot there. I agree. I want to talk a little bit about the Devils too, because and then also Evander Kane. So with the Devils,
Brad Marchand. We should have gotten to Brad Marchand before we.
Yeah, well, just
go to Marchand.
Okay, let's just touch on it briefly. He's a scum bucket. He's a great player. He's probably a Hall of Famer, but he's a scum bucket, and he does this all the time, and he doesn't stop. And now I think 3 games for that. He has spaced out his suspensions long enough that he's not considered a recidivist, but everybody knows that he is. And honestly, what they have to do, and I don't even think this will change it. So you suspend him for 10 games for the next slew that he does. It still won't stop him.
You know who was smart like that? The Zodiac Killer. He spaced things out too. Great. We had one person comparing Fauci to Joseph Mengele. Now you're that was awful.
Now you're comparing Brad Marchand to the Zodiac Killer.
No, I didn't say anything about Brad Marchand. I talked about
saying that
I was careful about that, Mike. That was the joke. But no,
Marchand's a jerk, but a very smart jerk.
He is a smart jerk.
Oh my God.
But and definitely. But listen, I mean, we just talked about.
He gets away with a lot, and I know people are mad because of Subban. You know what it is? End of the day, I've gotten very tired of trying to figure out what's his next suspension. What's Marchand's next suspension? I'm tired of it.
Oh, I mean, but we talked about Brandon Lemieux. Why is he still in the game? But but the difference between him and Marchand is that Marchand's a hell of a player. It's like, I mean, the reality.
But he's a better teammate. Lemieux's status as a teammate is in question, although Jonathan Quick came to his aid. But whatever.
Yeah,
Jonathan Quick is just being a good leader.
He is being a good leader.
But
Jonathan Quick doesn't speak up much about anything.
No, that's true too.
So the one thing I'll say about Jonathan Quick actually going public with anything is surprising.
Yeah.
I wonder if Claude Lemieux is his agent. But no, but Brendan Lemieux's got 4 goals in 14 games, which is honestly it was more than I thought he would have. He's actually doubled his production from.
And they've all been recent too. Like he didn't score in the first several games.
Yeah.
So they've all been like he probably has 4 goals in the last 7 games.
And in a humorous note, DJ Smith said he wasn't sure whether Brady Tkachuk needs a tetanus shot. So
that's true, though.
What does he think? Does he think that Brendan Lemieux has rabies?
It has nothing to do with that. The minute you get bitten by another human, or you step on a rusty nail, you're supposed to get the shot.
Yeah. Yes, you are indeed. Probably doesn't have rabies. That would be a rabies shot, Mike, and that would be different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's like 7 or 8. That's like 7 or 8 shots in the.
That's a horrible situation to be in.
Yeah. No, thank you.
If you're ever bit by a wild animal that you don't know if it's rabies, and then you have to just go and because before you even know.
Of the 3 of us, only one of us went out in the forest looking for bears.
I've been in some pretty scary situations where I thought I could be attacked by all kinds of animals, but yes, I've not yet been bitten by a wild animal. I'll give knock on wood. And Cliff Fletcher at one point today during the press conference,
not even a panther, not Cliff Fletcher,
Chuck Fletcher. I'm sorry, Chuck Fletcher knocked on wood at one point during the press conference today. It's never a good thing when your GM's resorting to knocking on wood.
When you're knocking on wood, you're running out of
problems.
Yeah.
Is this a trade?
Yeah, Cameron's reporting it, so I don't know. I haven't seen it yet, but I'll take his word for it.
Our man on the street, Cameron Young.
Yes, that's true.
No, he is. He's in Nashville.
Spill the beans, Cam.
Or he's not in Nashville. Is he Nashville?
He's in Edmonton, I believe.
He's in Edmonton. He's a Nashville fan. We've had him on the show.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes.
So our.
Oh wait, here's the trade. Nashville gets Cole Sherwood. The Senators' future considerations. Big deal.
Which means nothing. I was told by somebody because I think it was last week the Leafs traded for Kyle Clifford, And, he's making $1 million. He clearly wasn't fitting in St. Louis, and it was a trade for future considerations. And I was told by somebody the future considerations is nothing, that it's going to basically be they gave Kyle Cliff, which he still can play in this league, but they called up a lot of their young players, and he just didn't fit with St. Louis. So, and the Leafs will use him. He's an excellent 13th forward. So, hey, if you can get a guy for free, why not?
I'm going to buy a car later today for future considerations. I'm going to go up to the guy and say, what? I'd like to have this car, but I'm not sure what I want to give you for it. I'm going to wait and tell you later after I drive it for a couple
years. Pick for it. There you go.
I'll tell you what the future considerations is like when you buy a car from your dad for $1.
Case of beer. There you go.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cameron. I'm confused with the other. No,
and now he wants to come on the show. Way to open up that door.
We can have you on. Definitely. We should have Cameron on.
Not today,
but we will at some point have Cameron Young on. No, I appreciate it. We have another Cameron in Nashville.
So let's talk about Evander Kane.
Let's talk about Evander Kane. So his agent's out there talking it up right now. And, this is and he's talking to every rumor person imaginable. So,
by the way, his new agent, because apparently.
Yes, his new agent.
His new agent is Daniel Milstein. His old agent is part of a lawsuit against Kane. I don't know if Kane is the one who's suing them or they're suing him for something, but there's a lawsuit involving his former agent, so he had to find a new agent.
What a disaster. Yes. He's going to speak after practice today. That's what I heard.
His new agent is saying that there are teams that are interested in making a trade. So his new agent has been tasked by, the Sharks saying, fine, you try to find a trade, basically. Yes. So he's out there and, he's out there trying to find a trade. And it's not going too well, but he has said that there are some teams that have interest if they were to bring a third team into this to spread out the salary. So basically meaning that the Sharks would pay half of his salary, and then the team he's traded to would pay a fourth of his salary, and a third team would pay a fourth of his salary.
Right.
And which happened this done before.
That happened a bunch of times at the deadline with the Leafs did it with Nick Foligno. The Tampa Bay Lightning did it with David Savard. So it's now a common practice. But the thing is that his salary it's $7 million for the next 3 years after this year.
Right. So if you take that down to but less than $2 million, if you're paying a quarter of it a year, then it's. I mean, you're definitely going to get your money's worth production wise, but will he tear your locker room apart? Right. So that's
right. That's what the worry.
Because he's going to score goals. Is there a team out there that is enough of a strong locker room, enough of a strong coach? Is Evander Kane going to possibly have his moment where he realizes what he's done wrong and is going to be a good soldier?
No. He's uncontrollable. It's happened in Atlanta. It's happened in with the Sabres. It happened in Winnipeg. Yeah. It's happened in San Jose. Yes. If you're taking him on. Now the thing is, if it was a year, if it was a 1 year left, if this was the last year, if this was his walk year, I think a contending team would take a shot. Goalie FP in the chat says the Islanders. But the Islanders, right now, the Islanders are so far out of it. I don't know if they would go for it. Okay.
I'm going to throw out the Penguins' name. All right, and because the Penguins,
they might do it.
Brian Burke has done.
Brian Burke has a reputation of taking guys and giving
right. And if you're getting him for less than $2, I could see Burke. I could just hear a Burke thing saying, "Listen, less than $2 million. We got him for less than $2 million. He scores 25 goals a year. Like, what are we not? Why are we not bringing him? Giving him a chance. We can always not play him. We can always send him away. We can whatever. We can only pay him $2 million. I can see Burke doing it.
I'm going to go to the GM that has wanted him for a long time, and that was Glenn Sader with the New York Rangers. And it still would not shock me if they had interest.
Now, okay, so he's making $7 million. That means retaining 3.5 for San Jose. Another team retaining $1.75 million, and and the team getting him at $1.75 million for 3 more years. Now, the thing is, if it doesn't work out in New York, and we've seen this before with like a guy like Dion Phaneuf, if the Rangers make the trade and then they realize they've made a mistake and he's just incorrigible and they will buy him out, but they would only buy him out for their portion.
Right.
It would be on San Jose to pay the majority of that.
Yeah, no, this is a really risky thing for the Sharks to do. Like a really super risky thing.
Like they did Wade Redden.
Right now, when we talked about this, Doug Wilson is taking a leave of absence as the Sharks GM because of a health condition, not COVID, but some sort of health condition. And whoever their assistant is right now, do you think that they really want him handling the Evander Kane?
I think they would listen. They'll be in contact with Doug Wilson, and I think they would be more than happy to have that happen. I think the owner wants him gone. Period.
Now because somebody said in the chat about a buyout. If they bought out Kane at the end of the year, the cap hit would be 3.6, 2.6, 4.6 the next 3 years, and then 1.6.
They're not going to do it
for 3 years after that. So the thing is, if they trade him, then you're taking a hit of 3.5 for just the length of the deal. They don't want to go 4, 5, 6 years in.
Right.
So it would be beneficial for them to find a partner. But I don't know. I would run far away from Evander Kane.
I mean, this is the thing. If he's been through bankruptcy now. He's been there's other. It's definitely worse than it's ever been. So the reality right now is that if he's going to ever have enough bad things happen to him to straighten up his act at all, it would be now. If you're going to get, if you're going to get a guy who can score 20 goals for less than $2 million a year, that's something to look at. For if the team is strong enough in the locker room, if the team is strong enough coach-wise, are the Rangers that team? I don't know.
Gallant's not going to take anything. I would say this. The Rangers have a player that's probably never going to play for him in Vitaly Kravtsov. If you offer him for Evander Kane, I think the Sharks would take it.
I agree.
Oh, they would take it in a split second. Yes.
No, I would be surprised. I would be surprised if anybody offers them anything better than Kravtsov.
No. But you also have to get the third team involved. You have to get the third team involved, I think, to take this out.
Well,
if you're paying free,
I mean, yeah, probably. So then
Arizona or Buffalo,
right?
Yeah, $3.5 million.
And you let them get some draft picks out of it.
Yeah, right. $3.5 million is different, right?
Yeah, but for $1.75 million for 3 more years, that's probably worth a second round pick.
Yeah.
Yes. Because again, I'm not in favor of this deal, but I'm just telling you, with Kravtsov never playing for the Rangers again.
Yeah.
I can't kill him if they make the trade. I get what's wrong with Kane, but I get he could still do
it would be an awesome move for the Sharks. I think the Sharks would be thrilled. I mean, the Sharks are getting a potential star player, and then which I don't think they're expecting to get anything. I think they
would have to wait for him, because again, Kravtsov, who knows when he'll show up in San Jose. Right?
Yeah, I mean, but I don't even know. I don't know if you'd have to give him up. That's the thing, RS. I don't think. I just don't. I think you could get away with.
I think you'd be willing to, because it's like, why would you give up something else when you know this guy's not playing for you?
Yeah, but why wouldn't you hold on to him for something at the trade deadline?
Well, because I think they've been trying to trade him all along. He's scoring in the KHL, and still they haven't gotten a deal for him. That's why.
Yeah. I mean, maybe. I mean, I think that if you let him sit there, eventually someone's gonna be like, "Wow,
poor Johnny Red's gonna have a heart attack." Listen, I'm not saying it should happen. I'm just saying I could see it happen.
Okay. Kane, Will 85 in the chat is like Kane with Matthews and Nylander. Okay, now here's the thing. Positionally, the Leafs are going to be looking for a left winger. Kane's a left winger. That's where it ends, because they don't want that disruptive force in that locker room.
They can trade Michael Bunting for him.
Yeah, dream on. Russ, Michael Bunting is making $850,000 and has 6 goals.
Ooh, 6 goals.
I'm not saying he's an all-star left winger. I'm just saying he's a contributor and he's inexpensive. Kane, I honestly, I think the chances of him being more of a disruptive force to a team that is a contending team like Toronto is greater than the end result is I think not worth the risk. Now,
what if you trade him to his home? What if you trade him back home?
Oh, that's the worst. If he goes to Vancouver, it's the worst place on earth for him to go.
Yes.
Agreed. Yes, I agree with that 100%. But I'm just like, but there's another team that needs to do something. They need to make some kind of They got to do something, right? So,
well, not that.
I think that would be a disaster as well.
Poor Randy, I mentioned Michael Bunting, and now Randy's getting apoplectic. Can't
Well,
trade Bunting.
Well, Russ, that's because you're treating Michael Bunting. You're treating Michael Bunting like he's some sort of joke. I'm not saying that he's like the best thing since sliced bread. You know, he's just an effective player and a cost-effective player. So
There's a lot of things that are better than sliced bread since then, by the way.
That's true. You could update that reference.
Maybe that needs to be updated. Best thing since the iPhone. How about that? We'll throw that out there. All right. That's all the time we have for today. We thank you all for watching. Go to patreon.com/hockey and support us if you can. That would really be sweet. We would love it. And remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you again tomorrow.
Maybe.